His parents, I didn't really know much about my grandfather, but my grandmother, superwoman, very hardworking. She's very creative. He would often talk about his mom and how much he loved her, how instrumental she was in his life. She wrote songs and he would often play the piano. He's a self-taught piano player.
And he self-taught himself to play the piano. He didn't take no lesson. And he plays it with 2 fingers.
At my grandparents' house, they had this huge grand piano that was in the living room. And every time, me and my siblings and me and my parents would go over there, that was always where he would be.
At a young age, we learned a song that my grandmother had composed. We didn't really know the whole story behind it, but what we did know was that this song is what connected my dad to his mother.
I've always known that so strongly of how much he loved his mom.
My grandmother just made sure that she always took her children to church, and just made sure that they were cared for and made sure that they had a solid foundation.
One of his journal entries that really stood out to me, when he was 5 years old, he was sick, and his mother took him to go get a blessing from President George Albert Smith, who was one of the apostles. He gave him a blessing, and he still remembers that blessing word for word.
My grandfather, from what I was told by my dad, he was a hard worker. He works in a farm. He goes to the ocean, fish and stuff to provide for his family, but mostly work at a farm.
My grandfather, Salesi, would put them on a horse. He would have a sack to collect vegetables and fruits when they were working on the plantation. His dad always made sure that they were taught that important principle of work.
When he was, I believe, 8 years old, his father, Salesi Tonga, wanted him to attend a Methodist church school, and his mom gave him a choice to go to an LDS school. And it was a hard decision, trying to please both his mom and dad. And he mentions clearly that he wanted to make his mom happy. And so he chose the LDS church.
This is a very important part of my story too, about my father. So my first day at the school, and it was a school that my father went to, and my father was one of their top students. My father graduated from high school at 16 years old. But I remember my first day sitting in the classroom, and the teacher called my name, and the teacher is Tonga Paletua, a very influential in the island. And when he called out my name, he looked up at me and he stared at me and he said, "Are you Nifai's daughter?" He said, "Your father was a very brilliant man, a brilliant student," he said. He said, "If your father had stayed in school, he would have been a big government official or a school principal or something big."
He writes in his journal about the heartache that he had missing his father's funeral because he was going to school on another island. It's not like today where you can look online and see oh, that's happening halfway across the world, right? You had to sail for days to get to the next island, and you had to walk miles to get to your home, and he didn't have that information and didn't realize all that was happening.
He was really young. He was 17 when my grandfather passed. And so I can only imagine having to shoulder a lot of that responsibility.
So he had to step up and become a father figure for his younger siblings.
I'm grateful that my brother Nifai, who was always present in my life as a father figure.
So my dad is the oldest of his siblings. They so much respected him very much, not only as an elder brother, but just respectful in everything that he did, because he truly showed that he loved them.
He was at my high school graduation celebration. He attended my temple endowments, and he helped set me apart for my full-time mission. I later moved to Missouri, where I went to college at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and yes, he traveled up to attend my college graduation.
He also became like a provider for his other siblings.
Yeah, in Tonga, he was a farmer. He works the farm. He finds time to run a little taxi just to provide.
I think the passing of his father weighed heavy on him. There was a sense of responsibility that he had to take on.
He didn't really talk about his dad growing up. It probably affected him in a way where he disconnected himself or distanced himself a lot.
When his father died, it affected him so bad, affected him that when he went back to school, he started cutting class. He was a rebel. There was a fist fight somewhere, he wins. And when my father appears, everybody runs.
When I was a kid, my house was super into like video games. And I remember we just played games with him kind of the whole day. And there was one game that he loved to play, and it was a boxing game. And I just remember the smile on his face was so big. And he just kept saying like, let's play again, let's play again.
Man, I'm so scared of you, Mom.
I heard from other people, the man you marry is a fighting man. He hit everybody. And I said, I don't care. I like him. I love him.
My grandpa was married to Muamua Lolohea. That's his first wife.
So when my father left the island, that was the finish of his first marriage to my mother. There was 8 of us from that marriage.
At that time, there was a hurricane that hit the Pacific, and Samoa was one of the places that was really affected by that. And so the harvest that they were able to have in Tonga was one of the islands that wasn't affected so much by that hurricane. Their plantations and things that they were able to grow. They were able to put into containers and then bring those over to Samoa to sell and make money.
I do know that my grandpa met my grandma when he was in Samoa, working, selling. I want to say he was like selling talo and stuff.
And so when my mom went to the marketplace, I guess my dad met my mom there. And
when I met with him, he like an angel. He is a very good and very nice man. That's what I like him. My favorite memory for my husband is very nice to me. That's the main thing. I love you so. My sweet Lord, you're so far away from me. One thing I know, my dad loved my mom. I mean, he spoiled her, and he wanted her to know that she was a queen.
One of the ways that he had spoiled my mom was he bought her a Cadillac, a pink Cadillac.
He asked me, what car you need? And he said, whatever you want, whenever you want, Cadillac over here.
Even though my dad wasn't a materialistic person, like he just was not he wanted my mom to know that he was going to give her whatever she needed, anything. So her first kind of luxury car was a pink Cadillac, a beautiful car.
I'm going to share this. He told me this when I was dating someone. This is not my husband. I was dating someone, and he's like, Seppi, when you love someone, You should love them enough that it doesn't matter if you live in a cardboard box. And I was just like, what? I said, you don't want to build my house? And we just laughed. And he just said, that's, it doesn't matter where you live or how you live. If you love someone like that, it, the love will be the foundation.
And I don't know what year him and my grandma came to the United States, but he always has resided in San Bruno. I've never known my grandpa and grandma to live anywhere else.
Because when my dad came here to, the U.S., he had very little.
But I think he was looking ahead for us children. And I believe that's the main reason of leaving Tonga, for better love and better opportunities for education, for work, and for us and future generations.
My grandpa came to America and just like killed it.
He actually had so many different jobs.
He'd often work, 2 to 3 shifts at a time just to make sure that, he provided for all of my siblings.
But we have that time is available, then we go and looking for side job.
He also had a night job, I think at a restaurant that he was like cleaning. When he would have lunchtime on one job, he'd like go over with my grandma to clean like the kitchens or like some places near the airport.
Sometimes I would wake up and he would be gone to work, and then when I'd go to sleep, he'd still be, at work. And sometimes it seemed like I wouldn't see him for days.
I think one memory that I will always remember him by is he always gave my grandma a kiss before he left the house.
I remember in this very house where, my mom would walk him to the front door and they would give each other a hug and a kiss before he walked out the door, and he would tell, my mom how much, he loved her before he left.
Their day always started and ended with a kiss. And, as a kid, it's like, ew, gross.
I loved how my grandfather loves my grandmother, Upuia.
Watching my grandma and grandpa relationship was always my end goal. That was my end goal. That's what I wanted.
Showing each other love and respecting each other's decisions.
They are the epitome of what I would think a couple who is madly in love with each other would be.
Just a great example of what you would look for when you're looking for someone to marry. When I had met my husband, I was fortunate enough to have a great man in my life, like my grandpa, to show me what a good man is.
I think definitely his impact on me was, seeing just the presence of what a man should be, and seeing how not only he acted, but the way my dad acted, learning from him.
He set a standard as a grandpa of like, for me as a granddaughter, the kind of man that I need to marry, the kind of standards I need to have in raising my kids to not only be close to God, but also how they conduct themselves in community, being respectful, being kind, being people of service.
And that's the first home that my parents lived in on their own. And I'm walking right on the overpass of where my dad will walk to get to work.
So, my dad worked for the airlines. He worked for Pan Am for the longest time. He did like everything from driving the bus to doing ramp to just cleaning dishes and just everything that he could do to make ends meet. A lot of times when my dad would take me when I was a kid with him to work, because my dad worked for the airlines, and my dad's English was very minimal, so he didn't really understand. So he would have, the newspaper, or he would have some form of scripture, and then he would read it in English, then he would read it in Tongan, and then he would ask me, hey, what does this mean? You could see, the improvements he was making over time just with his sheer willingness and desire and determination to want to learn and be better. He got to a point where he knew that there was something more out there for him than just working at the airlines. So he ended up doing construction.
He was working at the airline at night, and then he would do the construction working during the day.
Well, he didn't really know too much about construction, but he had a lot of background from family members who, did construction.
And then he bought a house, like a 2-bedroom house. And then he wanted to bring all the kids, everybody, the rest of us and the rest of his kids. And my mom had 6 kids. My dad had 9 kids, and then they had 4 kids of their own.
In the first home that my dad built at 657 Walnut Street, it was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, small house, but a larger lot that you can expand in. And he wanted to build, and of course it's very different here in the States than it is in the islands, where you own land and you can kind of pretty much do whatever you want with your resources. And when he found out that there are certain processes that you have to do to build a home, this inspector kept trying to catch him, make sure he's kind of following protocol. One early morning when he tried to catch my dad and he came in, that he saw all of my siblings laying in the living room floor. And he had to practically climb in between the bodies that were sleeping.
I grew up in a home where there was 16 kids in the house.
I thought that was a normal life. All the homes that I go to, there's a lot of people that are staying, under one roof.
Just to get to the back where, he needed to inspect. And I think that was pivotal in him understanding how important it was for my dad to get the help that he needed to be able to pass inspection and move forward in expanding the house so that there can be space.
It went from a 2-bedroom, 1-bath to now we added on 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms and another bathroom just because there were so many people.
3 blocks down, there was an empty lot that became available, so he bought that lot. It was just all dirt, and this inspector, walked him through that process of building from the foundation up, and so that was his first real project from learning everything. And I think from that point on, it was a beautiful home that my brother Paul lives in now.
This home that I live in is a home that we built. Even homes that my dad's younger brother, we put on an addition, to make their house bigger.
He built beautiful homes and remodeled homes that we grew up in.
So they came, my dad kind of pulled all his family together, his, cousins and other relatives, and they just started building homes here in the Bay Area. My dad would load up all us boys on his truck, and we'd go to this house that they were going to demo. All the nails, whatever nails that we could, after we'd take them off the 2x4s and all the wood, he'd make us straighten out the nails and put them in the bucket, and then we'd all bring them home, and then we'd reuse them.
And then on the weekend, we would be hauling clothes from secondhand stores so we could put them in boxes and ship them to the island to sell.
He had relatives and cousins that, they had a business in Samoa. They had a business in Fiji.
Oh, my goodness. We always worked. We were always working. Believe me, at my age, 10, 11, 12, I was folding clothes, separating. I was rolling boxes, heavy boxes, lifting it on the truck and help him take it to the wharf to ship them off. I mean, we were working.
And I've worked since I was 14 and a half. I've worked 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and people would always, just last week, someone was like, "You're going to burn yourself out." And I said, my grandpa always told me to work as much as I can while I can.
My grandfather's the kind of man who would leave first thing in the morning before the sun came up, and he was at home when the sun went down, after the sun went down. And then even that, it was a come home, change, go out back into community and do his ministering work.
I've only known my grandpa to have work clothes or suits for church.
He was always a strong member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
My father was very faithful to his calling in the church. He held very important callings in the church.
Faith was everything to my grandfather. He was heavily involved with the development of the first Tongan Latter-day Saint stake outside of the island of Tonga.
You know, back in the 60s and 70s, there weren't very many Tongans or Polynesians here in the area. So, you know, when you found somebody, you wanted to connect with them. You know, and it didn't matter what religion you were a part of. It was part of our culture to be together as Tongans.
I had a kolisi tutuku. It's like a reunion. And so I think the person who was responsible for the money bag must have probably left it somewhere. Anyways, it ended up as my grandpa was cleaning up, I think it ended up in the back of his truck. And so when he had to unload, when he got home, he found it and he called. And that always comes to mind because it speaks to his integrity. I'm sure if somebody else will probably oh my gosh, this is a lot of money. We can do a lot of good in our family, especially my grandpa who has so many kids. But my grandpa was so honest and his integrity was so intact that, I'm sure he didn't even hesitate.
And so, my dad was very active not only in the church, but also wanted to use that, as a part of his ministry.
When we come over here, we go to church. Not too long, and my husband is a bishop.
He was a bishop. He was a high council, and then he was a patriarch. It's a lifelong calling in the church.
One thing that I will always remember about my grandpa and his callings is he took them very serious.
He lives by example. He lives by faith. He lives by true or genuine love, which is called charity in the scriptures. So I that's the kind that I always try to emulate in the rest of my life.
Humble yourself. Call him and ask him. Ask him whatever you want to be. He will help you. He will guide you. He will direct you. You're in the right place at the right time. Heavenly Father, prepare you to go in the fullness of time. This is the last dispensation, and the gospel of Jesus Christ will reach every single person in the world. They're supposed to listen to the missionary, to give them the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I bless you, and I ask you, be faithful and humble yourself. You will enjoy the Fijian people. It's very good people. They're very friendly. But go focus on reach every single person. Jacob, I love you very much. I love you. You're very humble, handsome young man. Satan wants you. He wants you so badly. But I believe in it. If you humble yourself and be faithful, the light of love will guide you and direct you, and you will walk in the light of Heavenly Father's love. Good luck.
If I complain to my father about anything, he turns it around and make it a teaching moment for me. He teaches me how to forgive, to be Christ-like. One time I was really going through some rough time where it was hard for me to forgive. I can't say it's hard for me to forgive. I just want my peace. I just wanted to be left alone. And when he found out that I was going through this, he said to me, one of his favorite words is, "It's going to be okay." He'd always tell me, "Saini, it's going to be okay." And I was able that very same day to go to these people and knock on their door. And when the door opened, They were about to just collapse to the floor. And I said, my father sent me. And they all cried and they said, he's a man of God.
I remember one time when we were riding in the limousine to the cemetery to bury my husband. That was like 11 years ago. And, assured me that whatever I needed, that he would be there. I'll never forget that day.
Something that all of us learned, all my siblings, is to stay close to the church, stay close to God, and just be together with family. It's always been about families.
One thing about my grandpa is he will never miss an opportunity to bear his testimony. Every family home evening, every family gathering.
When we had family home evening every Monday night, he would drag on and on and on because he talks about everything throughout the whole week. And then if he sees any of us sleeping, he'll just like, okay, you're going to say the prayer now.
My grandpa had the greatest impact by using one sentence on me. We used to have family home evening every Monday, and I would try to skip it every Monday because I hated when my grandpa, he'd go around and choose someone to say opening prayer or closing prayer. I didn't know what to say if it was my turn to say prayer. At one family home evening, my grandpa was like, Lena, can you say opening prayer, please? I was like, no, Grandpa, please, just no, I don't want to. Choose anybody else. Choose anybody else. He's literally the first person to have said to me, Lena, just talk to him. Whatever's inside your heart, you just say. It's okay. It's okay. And it was, I think, still one of my most emotional prayers I've ever said in my whole life.
The most important thing that I always remember my father is before I left on church missionary to Canada. He gave me a blessings and I still have it on my journal. I think that was the best moment in my life, is for him to be able to lay his hands upon my head and pronounce a blessing that will forever be remembered. And I look back, most of these blessings have been fulfilled.
Father in a family, father in a church, and all over the place where we go, they call as a father.
So my dad is Nifai Jr.
They had a really interesting relationship. Junior had a big heart. He was like my dad in a lot of ways. But I know he carried a lot of pain too in his life.
My grandpa and my dad butt heads a lot. My dad was not the easiest of his kids.
I think he had a longing to be recognized by my dad. He needed my dad more than most of us. It was he needed him in a different way. He talked about, how my dad didn't come to his football games. And
I believe my dad's passing impacted my grandpa in a very hard way. They say that parents are never prepared to bury their own child. And it was so unexpected. In my conversations with my grandpa afterwards, and even immediately after or years after, there was some regret. It was hard,
I saw how much pain he felt at my brother's funeral.
Being a grandparent makes up for the things they couldn't do or couldn't be as a parent. He definitely was present. He loved celebrating all of his grandkids.
I could see the difference of how my grandpa fathered versus grandfathering in the way that maybe because I was a granddaughter, even when I did wrong, I couldn't do wrong.
My grandparents live right down the street from our elementary school. And I remember sometimes when we'd walk over there after school, I just remember him always saying like, man, are you guys hungry? Are you guys want to go to sleep? Man, you guys just go sleep on the couch or something. And I just felt like it was such like a flip from what my dad said, because my dad was like, man, this guy always wanted us to work from when the sun came up till the sun went down. We go home, do work at home. And
As a grandfather, he was really firm on us grandkids and like always wanted the best for us. I would say he was pretty strict, but very loving.
My dad not only inspired his children, but he inspired a lot of people to realize their potential.
You can never say that a person was a waste of time. Like, what a waste. He hated that. Like you see a homeless person, you're not productive. And he would say, everybody is productive. Everybody has something to give.
Diagnoses or race and ethnicity, my grandpa didn't see any of that when it came to service. Like, I remember him coming home with a random white guy who needed a place to stay.
I don't know how he met him. I want to say the story is he was going to the store and he seen a guy who was homeless outside that wanted a job or was like looking for help, and my grandpa took him in and brought him home.
Brian, who is still like a part, like when I go back to California and I run into Brian, like that's still Uncle Brian.
And he lived with us. And he took him to church and took him to work. Like, my grandpa just like always made everyone feel so welcome.
If I can say one thing about him, he was like the Granham Central Station. Everybody comes to him for something and he will just take them in. It's like his policy was to keep my door open.
Our house was like open to everybody and anybody. So like, even though there was a sibling sets, which is 9 of us kids, he also housed like church family members that needed a home for like years.
I think growing up, there was a woman and her daughter who didn't have a place to stay, and I remember coming one day to my grandparents, and my grandma was like sitting on this what are those beds that kind of blow up, and it was like deflated, and I'm like, why are you sitting on this bed like this, grandma? That's like the air was coming out, and she said, oh, grandpa, somebody needed a place to stay, and they're staying in the room right now. And I remember like just thinking like, why are you guys sleeping on the floor in the living room and having someone else stay in your room? But as I grew up to appreciate and to know that my grandpa was teaching us how to be Christ-like.
Somebody needed, to do something at their house with remodeling their bathroom or fixing up their kitchen or, doing roofing or just any work at their house. It was like, okay, let's go do a service project.
He'll just go and do it free of charge. And sometimes my mom would say, free of charge? How are we going to feed the kids if it's free of charge all the time? He said, his favorite quote is like, it's okay, God will provide.
If they need help, we can help. No matter whatever they need, the money or food or whatever, we can help.
These people need help, and I'm going to help them. And we'll figure everything out later.
People really respected my dad to where, hey, you get, we're going to give you, an award for the city of San Bruno because of your appreciation and dedication to the community. I think my dad still has the award hanging someplace or.
So prior to his stroke in 2008, my grandfather had an accident in the backyard where he was cutting a piece of wood and the skill saw kicked back and it cut like the tendons or in his hand, where the parts of your hand that moves your fingers. I think that was the start of, some of the changes in his life as far as being able to provide fully.
My family didn't know that I was actually in Oakland at the time that my dad had the stroke. And I received a phone call from one of our managers. You need to stop what you're doing and report to the office immediately. I said, what's wrong? He said, just come to the office and, I'll share with you the information. So when I got there, they said, your dad had been rushed to the hospital. He had a stroke. When the nurses allowed me to go in and see him, the first thing that he said to me is, are you okay? He was more concerned about my well-being than his own. I think that was one thing that I've learned more about my dad. He always thought of others before himself.
It was a major stroke. They didn't think that he would respond, that his life would be completely different. They didn't think he was going to walk, talk, anything on his own, that he would be 100% dependent and may not last too long after, if he recovers fully at all. And I remember it was within that week of being in the hospital and he was not responding. And I remember coming home with my mom and some other family members to just kind of grab some belongings. But I grabbed a speaker and I remember taking it to the hospital, and that night we played music. He grabbed my hand and he just started doing this to like the beat of the song. And that was like the first time I felt like we knew he could hear everything that was happening around him in that room.
When my grandpa got his stroke, I know it was so difficult for him because he was such an active man.
After his stroke, there was a lot of rehabilitation. He was bedbound for a bit. He needed to learn how to talk and he needed to do physical therapy. So a lot of redevelopment and reconstruction there. And with that comes spouts of depression. That was a time of our lives where we were like, this man who could carry the world on his shoulders now is having challenges, moving around and standing. Like his grumpiness on a whole nother level. And sometimes in those moments, like other underlying things would come up, like he'd yell at me about something that happened like 6 years ago. Or he'd like go off about that time where I didn't want to practice the piano. And I was like 10 and now I'm 16.
When he had a stroke in 2008, a few years later after he went through therapy and was well enough to kind of move around and have company, we started doing an annual Music for the Soul recital. It's just for my dad to be able to see music continuing to be played, and you could just see him light up.
During his last years, we would have musical recital for him, and he'll just smile. It's just soothing to the soul,
I have one regret. My dad being a hard worker, a contractor, a servant, his truck was his biggest tool, right? His truck has been sitting in the driveway for like 5 years. It's on bricks because the tire is off. It hadn't been driven in years. We were getting complaints from the city that we had to clean up. Like there were layers of why we were doing it. And I arranged for the tow people to come and take it so we can clear up the space, have space for the kids to play outside and just have a clean backyard. My dad was, it took a lot for him to walk. He was napping inside the house. He was asleep. He wasn't napping, he was asleep. Somehow, some way, he heard the beep of the tow truck and worked his way outside. When I saw my dad's face, felt like I took something away from him. It's an old truck, but for my dad, that was his story. That was his years of hard work of helping people. A while later, I remember talking to my dad about it, and he was laughing about it, and but in that moment, I'll never forget that. So, sorry, Dad. Sorry for getting rid of your truck.
I lived with my grandfather since I was born. He was energetic. He loved when I said good morning to him before I came to school.
One more to Tam.
The next day, I deliver the food to the market, to the supermarket, where to sell it. So I went over there and started selling the dinner. I have some little money. I make it very good money. I never make that much money back home, But I was very careful. I didn't spend, I saved it because I know that I had a plan I want to come to the United States.
Because he had to work hard even though he was hurt, and he tried to do as much things as he could to help us.
I remember recording conversations, with him where, it was almost like, gosh, Dad, you can barely, speak, but here he was just putting every ounce of energy that he had just to tell me certain things.
On my vehicles, I pick a vehicle. Kota matayaki. It's enough for a family.
And on his last day, he was resting at home, and I was asleep at the time. So my sister and my mom went into the living room while the hospice nurse giving him medication. And somehow I just got up and I went in there and just held his hand while the nurse was finishing. And he just held my hand real tight. And he had that look of that same look that my husband looked at me, like it was time. And I just looked at him and I said, Dad, I love you. It's okay. I just told him, it's all right. Just like what he said to me when my husband passed. And everything was going to be okay.
After he had passed away, for a few weeks, I felt like it was so hard for me just to go back to his house. Just because I knew he wasn't going to be there anymore.
Nifai was a strong family man. The core traits that he defined his character as committed to active responsibility in serving his family and many others in his community. I will always be grateful for his love shown to me as his younger sister. Thank you, Nifai, for always being there for me.
Because we grew up with him and my grandparents in their home, couples, I get it now that I'm married for 14 years. How at the end of the day, you're winding down with your wife and talking about the day. And one thing that, oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. is how him and my grandma would banter at the end of the night and just laugh.
I miss how happy he makes my grandma. Ever since he's been gone, my grandma's just, all she talks about is, I want to go home to daddy. And him not being there is, I mean, I can't imagine losing my husband after decades and decades.
I miss a lot. I miss a lot of him because he is a very nice woman. I cannot explain how much I feel.
I just miss his voice. I miss his smile. And I just miss his just being around him to provide us guidance and advice.
I miss how doesn't matter how bad you think it is. He always has the right thing to say. That's what I miss, I think, the most.
Whatever problem I had or whatever I was going through in life, he stayed very middle grounded for me. Not upset, not overly like a helicopter grandpa of like watching every move I make. I remember if I sat down next to grandpa on the couch, and he'd always put his arm around me, and he'd always say, I love you, Lena. I love you, and just he'd always say, make the right decision. He'd always say, make the right decision. And so I'll always remember how he said decision. It always runs in the back of my head when I have a big decision to make.
I remember when I would shake his hand, he would squeeze my hand as hard as he could. And he would always tell me, and he would just laugh, and he's like, are you a tough guy? I hear you're trying to be a tough guy. And he would just squeeze my hand as hard as he could, and he would just be laughing.
I'd always stay with my grandma, and I would play at my grandpa's feet, and he was always on the phone. And I would sometimes listen to him. He's always talking about forgiving others, and to be kind and to be patient, and probably doing damage control, squabbling like conflicts. And
In my heart, I'm always apologizing to my grandpa. I wish I would have seen the importance of my decisions when I was younger. I would have listened to my grandparents. I love my life. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. But if I would have taken an easier road to get here, not having to get lost so many times on the way.
I think for this documentary, for anyone who is watching it, right, I hope that they understand how great of a man he was. I just hope that, his legacy will continue to live on, even to those who, may never meet him.
He loved his family. He loved God. He loved everyone. He's a man of service. He's a man of fairness. And he's a very forgiving person.
The impact that my grandfather had on me, really, it has to do with his love for Jesus Christ. That's a huge impact, and it's the way that I felt that made me want to be a better person.
People always tell me, if your dad was here, he would be proud of you. But in reality, I'm proud to have had him as my dad.
He's the best dad I could ever ask for.
What would I want to do with my dad if I had one more day with him?
I would give him a big hug and say, thank you for teaching me who I am today.
If I had one more day with my grandpa, I would want to just talk so I could actually listen. I think a lot of the time of my grandparents raising me, I talked too much and I didn't listen enough.
I will just tell him that I love him and thank him and thank him. I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful for him. And I want my children to remember him.
Maybe go grab some ice cream. Tell him how much I love him.
I would just want him to know how much I not only appreciated him, but how much I loved him. And so if I had one more day, I think I would just do all I can to make sure that he feels that.
I'd love to hold my grandpa's hand one last time. And if I had one day with him, I will be at his feet to thank him for loving us the way he did. Loving us unconditionally. To being a great dad, being a great grandfather, and being a great example to all of us.
I cannot explain how wonderful man I have.